everybody, and we are back again. Had a little technical difficulty on my first attempt to go live, so this is attempt number 2, and hopefully this will end well or begin better, because I don't know what I'm going to talk about today. I was debating actually whether to cancel the stream today and maybe see if I was more inspired tomorrow, but something told me to come on and kind of do it and see what kind of came to mind. Normally people come in kind of once I get started, so I'll talk for a while and then hopefully we'll have people join us, and then we can take the conversation in different directions as long as we're kind of stay on topic of consciousness and expanding our consciousness. That is what we're gonna do. So, what to talk about? I did recently just see a video on loneliness. This is good, yeah. It's gonna be super uplifting topic today. But actually, it was interesting that the person described loneliness as being disconnected from outside connections, from outside people. Whereas I would look at it differently and say loneliness is when you're disconnected from yourself. It has really nothing to do with the people outside. Now, I will say that when you're more connected with yourself, you're going to have a stronger connection with people outside of you, just because the inside connection is going to be mirrored by your outside connection. So they're going to be related, but I don't feel like loneliness has anything to do with your connections with outside people. Now, that's not saying that during this whole time when a lot of us are more isolated, even when you go outside, you don't connect with people. But I really don't think that has much to do with whether you feel loneliness, maybe a little more isolated, or I kind of want to say ostracized, but I don't really like that word. But I do kind of feel that's the word that's coming to me. You feel kind of outside of everything. But a lot of this journey, when you start to raise your consciousness and you start to look at everyone else that's in a different frequency than you are, it feels like, I don't like the word ostracized, but it's the only one I'm getting, so I'm gonna just go with it. You just don't feel like you're part of anything anymore. Though you're kind of part of something bigger, but people don't see it like that because you don't operate on the same frequency. You don't have the same responses to things. You don't have a normal response to things. You know, people will talk about something, and it can depend, because sometimes people will play in a lot of victim energy about something, and sometimes we're just there to listen. Other times, people talk about that stuff, and we know we're supposed to shift it. We're supposed to shift it for them in some way, even if it's just something we say and frame it as, if it was me, I would think about it like this, whatever it is. But it kind of depends. But when you don't play into a lot of that stuff, people that are playing into those energies don't really have a call to connect with you. Whereas people who want to get out of those types of energies and to look at things on a different perspective will have a call to connect with you. So you'll find people are going to come in and out as they feel called to connect with you, because you are going to be a higher version of them in a lot of different ways, because you're at a different frequency than they are. You're kind of like a future version of them. Just like when you're connecting with higher versions of yourself, they're future versions of you. You're just not, and their future, in a sense, you're not there yet. So they're in a different space than you are. They're living out a different reality that you're living out. So when you dream, you can see a lot of that stuff, right? Like when you're dreaming, you have the space to see that. But you'll find loneliness kind of plays a different role, and the wording is kind of different, I think, depending on which stage of consciousness you're in and what dimension you play in. If you're playing in a third dimensional level of consciousness, then and then that just means you're sort of still in the matrix programming of everything that goes on, still thinking it's outside. Everything outside of you kind of changes what you do. You're kind of playing, everything out there is the movie, and you have this very minor role. Where it's the opposite of that when you start moving into different levels of consciousness, where you realize you're controlling the whole thing. You just don't realize you're controlling the whole thing when you're embedded into it. I'll say, I've heard it said, and I 100% agree, a third dimensional level of consciousness is like a cult. So when you try to break out of that, you know, you have your own programming trying to keep you in it. So you have the battle inside, and then a lot of times that's going to be mirrored by a battle outside where a lot of people are trying to keep you in it. Because breaking out of it weakens that whole entire collective, kind of weakens the cult. So when you're feeling loneliness in a third dimensional level of consciousness, you do want to go out and connect with the outside. But it's really just more wanting to connect with inside, but we don't see that yet. We feel like it has to do with outside. A lot of people in COVID would say they were lonely because they couldn't connect with people, or they didn't have, you know, the relationships they wanted with people. And one thing COVID showed us was how strong our relationships were. How many people were there and how many people you didn't see or didn't hear from. So a lot of people you might have thought were close friends, when you had to really look at who you wanted to keep around, and when people looked if they wanted to keep you around or not, it got really small. And I'm sure a lot of people got shocked at how many people you didn't hear from. And that's kind of the way our human aspect kind of looks at it. Like, oh, look at who I did, not who I heard from, look at who I didn't hear from. And let's just look at that, because that's going to kind of be a springboard off once things shift again and people start letting more people back into their sphere. We're starting to see a little bit of that. Different states in the United States anyway are starting to do that. I can't really speak too much to the rest of the world, but you know, it's starting to shift a little bit, and everyone's sphere is getting a little bigger in some areas. Some areas it's still not. It depends on people, how they feel about it too. And you'll see what comes back in, and you'll see who wants to bring you back in. And then it's our decision. If you were one of the people who got kind of cut out of some people's reality when their world got small, and now they kind of want to bring you back in, do you want to go back in or not? Do you want to be in that type of relationship? Is it better to be lonely, or is it better to be in that? Because in that third dimensional level of consciousness, we'll see things a little bit differently. We'll see it as, we're going to run a story around it too. You know, in a third dimensional level of consciousness, we're going to run a story around why wasn't I in their life? Why didn't they pick me? Why was other people they talking to and not me? Why was I in there? I wasn't really in their sphere anymore. What happened there? Where when you shift it to a different space, a different level of consciousness, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15, as high as you want to go, as high as you have the capability to go at this moment, you can kind of shift to see, well, number one, the beeping, oh, sorry, that should go off now. A trigger, I assume, but that should go off. And I have to get back to hopefully that was something that came on my phone. So apologies for the beeping, anyone who that annoyed. We're very high tech here at the Art of Intuition, as you can see. Oh, it's fine. I don't take it personally. Don't worry about it. Okay, so, and I do take questions if anyone has questions. If not, I'm just going to go on this theme until someone has a question. I don't remember where I was. Oh, loneliness. When you start shifting it, you're not going to so much look at who didn't want you there, but you look at it as these people got removed for a certain reason. So you start to see that they weren't there because they weren't supposed to be there. You get out of the victim mentality of it, of, oh, I wasn't in their life, and you get into a different space where, oh, wait a minute, they weren't supposed to be there. That's when you start to shift it. So when I say a different level of consciousness, you shift it, now you shift the entire situation. Now you're not a victim to what they wanted. They are now in your world and you've removed them. Now the question is, why did you remove them? Did you remove them because, well, there's a zillion reasons why I removed them. One, whatever they were bringing to the table for you was not appropriate for the next phase you were going to go into. They were going to hamper something you had to do. whether they kept you in a certain energy, they kept you in a certain pattern, them going away might cause a lot of grief energy to show up. And you might have to clear a lot of that grief energy. And that has a purpose to it, because with all that stuff in there, you can't get to the next frequency. So they left for that reason. And also there was something that they were keeping you in that wasn't productive. You had to move on to something else. And within there, you can't do that. So that's when I talk about you having to shift it. That's how you start to shift. You start to see that, yeah, no, I'm not a victim to that. I removed them. I removed them because they didn't have a need to be here anymore. Now, when they come back in, now you have a decision to make. Do you want them there? Or is it going to flip back to where you kind of feel disempowered by the whole experience? Are you going to be able to move forward? Because one of the things I'll always say, like, our soul doesn't pick sides. You know, there's no right, there's no wrong, there's no good, there's no bad, there's no this, there's no that. It just is. It was there for a reason, then it wasn't there. Okay, now it's back again, and it's back again for a reason. Now, why is it back again? Do I want to see if everyone shifted? COVID did shift a lot of people. You know, we got a lot of clarity in 2020 on what was going on with a lot of our relationships. And then we get to decide if we wanted to come back in or not. But if we take back the same stuff again, then we really didn't sort of learn our lesson. So then we can look at loneliness from a totally different perspective. Did we do it? Are we doing it, going to take them back because we feel lonely? What do we want out of it? Because loneliness is an emotion of a very disconnected state. Now, in the third dimensional level of consciousness, we would say loneliness is because we're disconnected from other people. We're disconnected from ourselves. So if you let people back in that don't make you happy, you have to bear the question, why are they there? What do you want out of it? We want something out of it. You can have the purest, what you would think is the purest agenda in a relationship, but when you really look at it, you wanted something out of it. Unless you were creating it from one of the highest states of consciousness you could, which perhaps you were, but a lot of the ones I looked back on personally for me, I had an agenda. Even though I would have sworn at the time I did not have an agenda, I did have an agenda. And that kind of plays back into a lot of telepathy. People know you have an agenda. They might not consciously know you have an agenda, but subconsciously they pick up on the agenda. They know what you want on some level. So we have to kind of be really real with ourselves, like what we do let back in, what we don't want to let back in. But don't recreate the same thing again. What our human will want to do is look at that person again and say, oh, well, it's the same old person. I don't want that anymore. Forget about it. Well, it may not be. You shift the timeline. You shift a frequency, you shift the whole timeline. You might get a totally different aspect of that person, one that might fit better with where you're at right now and have a totally different purpose than what it did before, or be more enjoyable. But you don't know if you don't give it a shot. Now, that's not saying if you see the old behavior coming in and they start playing their role in the play and you start playing your role in the play, that it's not going to be the same dynamic again, because it very well could be. A lot of times these things come back in to see if we're going to keep accepting less. And that's really kind of what it goes back to. Are you going to keep accepting less? How much value do you put on yourself? Are you going to accept less from people over and over and over again? Now, there are times we're supposed to be there for people because we made that agreement that we would be there. And there are times when it gets so lopsided and so disgenuine in a sense that we have to really decide, do I really want to be here anymore? Is it serving anybody? There's a time when us being there for people serves them because they understand what it feels like when someone does support them. And a lot of people never really feel that. They never feel someone who comes in just to be there for them. So people need to know what that feels like. But there's a time when you have to look, am I really supporting them, or am I kind of enabling shitty behavior? Am I saying that this is okay? Because it might not be what is the highest line for me to do. Maybe me being here anymore is now hampering them from doing something else. And that's not a role I can play anymore. So our roles are going to continuously shift. And if you look back on a lot of your relationships, you'll see where your role shifted. You know, you can kind of be a childlike in a relationship and be someone's like inner child in a sense. You can be someone's mother or father and have that kind of role, and then it shifts, and then you're a sister or brother, and then maybe it's romantic, and it sounds kind of convoluted when I say it like that, but it'll always shift. It doesn't always stay the same because it's not supposed to. They shift, we shift, we shift, they shift. Their energy goes to one place, our energy goes to one place. So if we keep on the theme today, which is whatever I guess I want it to be, we keep on the theme today of loneliness and what does it mean in different states of consciousness, you start moving into higher states of consciousness. Loneliness takes on a different meaning. And it's more like you start to really see it as you're disconnected from inside. So what disconnects us? Why are we disconnected? Some people go as far as to say everything you put in your body, everything you subject your body to continuously disconnects you. Chemicals in the body, medications, all that stuff will work on, because it's a body process too. It's not just, oh, I'm going to expand my consciousness. Now I'm in these amazing realities. The body's got to come with it. Your body has to experience the realities. If your body doesn't come with it, you can't experience the realities in this physical state because your body's not there. You have to hold the state. So the more times we compromise, internally compromise, the more we start to separate ourselves off. And we're not just talking about this reality. We're talking about all the multi-dimensional realities you play in. You've separated off in every reality. So you're trying to bring everything back into one space, one body, all those pieces of yourself. Anytime we internally compromised, we did something we knew we shouldn't do on a soul level, a real internal compromise. It's not one of those compromises where, yeah, you want Italian, I want Chinese. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the real compromises. You know, someone wants children, you don't want children. You know, I mean, the deep ones, you know, a job that makes you so unhappy, or a job that you know is not aligned on the highest level. Getting involved in stuff that you know is hurting people. Anytime we get in realities that are consciously hurting people, we know we really have to go back and realign. Consciously hurting people. You know, it gets to a point where you can't enter into timelines anymore where someone's going to get hurt intentionally because, you know, you're lying to them. You're saying something, you're doing something that's very hurtful to them. You know, cheating on somebody. There's a time when that stuff can kind of play out because those are roles you were supposed to play. And there are times when you have to be so responsible for your energy when you shift to different states of consciousness, where you know you can't participate in that. You can't participate in realities like that anymore. You can't be in realities that are going to hurt people. You have to get it all. You have to straighten out that we have to try to align the reality first. And the best way to do that is to be open and honest about what's going on in the reality. But the human does not like the open and honest part of anything. I mean, when we're really in our human aspect, how many times are we open and honest with people? I mean, you can probably count on one hand the times you were open and honest and kind with people, like really honest about something. It's just not our natural state when you're in your human programming. But that kind of gets back to why loneliness and depression and all those things, they feel so isolated and so bad. It's not our natural state. It's not our soul state to be disconnected from ourselves. That's not our natural state. That's why none of those emotions feel good when they start coming up, because they're not our natural state. Our human ego is not our natural state to live from. It's the one we live from because we have all this programming telling us we're supposed to. You have all the internal programming, and then when you look outside, you have all the external programming that's going to match that. That's going to come back and say, yeah, you have to do it that way. That's the way everybody does it. What's wrong with you? Get in, drink the Kool-Aid. Everyone does it this way. Everyone has a job they hate. You just have to stay in. Everyone has a boss they hate. Everyone has this. Everyone has that. You know, if you don't do this, you'll never make money again, and you'll live in the street. Whatever the story is that you're listening to. But we all have like the similar stories. We all have a very similar programming. It might play out differently for each of us, but we all have it. So it's important to really look at why you're participating in something and be responsible for it. Sometimes we can participate and know it's really kind of screwed up, but there's a reason why we're there. We kind of know that. Even though we might not know it at the time, we know there's a reason, especially when we're really in our human states. We might not consciously know, but we stay in it because we know we're supposed to stay in it. There's a reason we're supposed to stay in it. So those are things that you don't really have to, but if you're watching this stream, I assume you have some interest in looking at it, looking at why you're in certain things. What is loneliness to you? What pulls you out of it? A lot of times pulling us out of that is just being happy about whatever it is that makes us happy. And that's because our heart opens up. Our heart opens up, we connect more. It has nothing to do with the thing that's doing it. Whether it's petting a dog, petting a cat, going outside, doing something nice for somebody you don't even know. It doesn't matter what it is for you. But there's something that's going to connect you. But it's not connecting you in the way you think it is. The linear mind thinks it's connecting you because, it's connecting me to the outside. It's connecting me outside. It's connecting you inside. The outside is just going to kind of bring that back. But you'll find the more you connect inside, the more you have very little interest in connecting outside. Because connections aren't pure. Especially when you're dealing with someone's human programming, they're not pure connections. And if they're not pure connections, you kind of don't want to tolerate them anymore because you demand the best in a sense. You can't settle for that stuff anymore. So when people are not authentic and they're not genuine, we don't want to play in it. And that could lead to what some people would say, that's more isolation. Well, a lot of being, I'd love to say, I'm going to use the word journey, and I don't really like the word. Everyone's on a journey. But when you are on a journey to higher consciousness and it's your time, everyone's going to do the journey. Everyone's doing the journey now. It's just, when does it really kick in for you? Everyone has that programmed into their DNA, some experience that's going to kick it in for you. And you'll know when that is. But you're always striving toward that. Everything's kind of almost like a warm up to the main event. But you're always going toward higher levels of consciousness. You're always going to keep expanding. But when you really get into the journey of the soul, or really embodying in your soul, trying to hold yourself and all the aspects of you from all the compromise we've ever done in this reality and all our other realities, it's not a team sport. It is not something you do with a lot of people around. You will find a lot of people will just get removed because they're not appropriate, which brings us back to COVID. A lot of people were starting that journey in 2020. They needed the push. The collectives needed the push. Well, okay, we're going to give everyone the push, and then you got to see everyone kind of leave. And that can be even worse in the beginning, because it's not what you think your natural state is. You're supposed to have a lot of people around. There's supposed to be a lot of drama. The third dimensional reality, that level of consciousness, it's all drama. It's all drama everyone's creating to play in different drama because they don't want to really deal with themselves. So they want to make up all the other shit about everybody else. Because if you start pointing at everyone else's stuff, then you don't have to look at your own. That's the human ego. It's just deflection. This person did that. Oh, that person did that. Doesn't matter. If it's not you, if it's not in your immediate reality, it's not affecting your reality, it doesn't matter. It's not even real. If it's not happening to you right in this moment, it's not real. It's something that happened before, which dissolved as soon as you left it. It's not real anymore. So what are you going to look at? What are you going to create now? And if we're stuck in that stuff, we can't create the next thing. Now that takes a while to get used to kind of dissolving it and letting it go and saying, okay, that doesn't exist anymore. That happened 10 minutes ago. That's done. What happened 10 minutes ago might as well have been 20 years ago. It's no difference. It's no longer part of your reality. Now that's not to say, even though this is a journey of being isolated, that you're lonely. you'll find your world gets really small because you can't tolerate a lot of things. One, you're trying to get your frequency to a certain level, certain space, and you can't do that with a lot of people around because everyone's got different frequencies. That's why you get so agitated when you're around a bunch of people. Because once you start tuning into your frequency, you can feel your frequency when it starts dipping. Because you can't hold on to it anymore. You know, you're trying to hold your frequency and you have all these other frequencies that are different. Everyone's trying to calibrate. If you can't get on the same page, after a while you're just exhausted. You just want to leave because you can't, your body, it starts to work differently. It's not like when you had a carbon-based human body. Your body starts to shift and you can't tolerate that stuff anymore. You know, when you're really in a higher frequency, kind of dreamy state, it's hard to deal with people who aren't at that frequency. It's not saying their frequency is bad. It's where they are. That's where we all were too, but it's hard to deal with those people because they're so different from you. And you can see the illusion that they played in because you played in the same one. So a lot of this stuff will come back around for us to see it. It's like, oh, well, I played in that too. I did that too. So you can't judge where people are because we did it too. But then again, it doesn't mean you got to have it in your life anymore. And that's where the rub comes for a lot of people because they don't want to, oh, hello, because they don't want to let it go. They feel like everyone's supposed to be around forever. They feel like everyone's supposed to be around and they're never supposed to leave. But in reality, everyone leaves, in a sense. You know, no one's here permanently. Everyone ebbs and flows. And even if the form doesn't ebb and flow for you, there are some people that are with people for years and years and decades. Their aspects shift because they shift. Can you look at someone and see the different aspects of them? That's kind of the question. Are you able to see that, or do you just see it all as one person? Because they're not. You always hear the story about how, you know, someone will, you know, they'll date a person for years and then all of a sudden they'll break up and they see them with a new person and they're acting totally different than they acted when they were with them. Because they're showing the new person a different aspect. And you're like, wow, like they're making that up. That's not really them. No, it's them. It's just not an aspect you got to see. Now it could be it's an aspect they're doing because they want to impress a new person. So they're bringing one of their higher aspects, one of their better aspects forward, but they can't hold that aspect. My guess is normally I'm right on that one, especially if it's very, very new, like, you know, one relationship right to another one, they can't hold that aspect for long. Eventually it's going to crumble because they can't hold it. You see that a lot when people go through like counseling and marital counseling and stuff like that. You know, it'll get better for a little while, but neither party can hold that aspect because it's not their natural frequency. They have to go through a longer period of time to hold a different frequency to hold that, embody that aspect. They can't embody that aspect right away. That's just not what they do. It's not what they have the capability to do. So can you look at someone and see their different aspects? See the ones you like, see the ones you don't like, see when people shift, see when they're really in their human. I always usually go back to astrology when I look at someone's human program because astrology tells me exactly what their human go-to is going to be. And then you just know exactly when they hit that, when they go right back into human ego programming, you know that aspect a million miles away. You know exactly what their go-to is going to be because they're running a certain program. But you will find that as you expand your consciousness, that connections are different. And it's not that we don't want to connect. You just find you're connecting quicker, shorter exchanges with people. It doesn't have to be like this big, long relationship. It can be an hour discussion with someone you just met and you talked to in a bar for whatever period of time, 20 minutes, and that's all the connection you really needed. Because it was just to connect with somebody. You could have talked about nothing. It didn't really matter. You don't need that to expand. The human wants to keep it going. No, let's talk again. And sometimes it's like, do we really need to? I feel like we're kind of done. You know, I think we kind of talked. It's like you'll see that a lot when people are on one streaming service and people go, oh, like, do you have another one where we can talk? I'm like, well, that's what we're doing right here. We don't need to go on another one. This is the purpose of this one. It's where we can all get together and talk about stuff. We don't need another one. But the human always is gonna want a reason for it. They don't see the higher purposes for it. You know, the human, that level of consciousness, it just sees it as, oh, well, it has to mean something more. You know, it has to mean something more than that. So it's just interesting that to look at it from different spaces. You know, have you ever had a connection that you might have talked to someone for 10 minutes and you're like, well, that seemed pointless. Or talked to someone for a year and you're like, oh, that seemed pointless. It really didn't go anywhere. There's a reason for it. You're clearing programming. Sometimes it's just like a little connection. You talk to someone, you might say something to them, plant a little seed in some way, you know, something you say and they'll be like, oh, they'll remember that later. They might not remember you later, but they'll remember that. Like, oh, that was kind of interesting. I learned something new, and you move on. And it doesn't have to be a long conversation. I think I told the story about how I started doing this. I was sitting next to this man I'd never met before. And he started talking about Twitch, and he was like in his 70s. It was not like, you know, a young person. And I think this normally streams a little bit younger. I don't know that much about the platform, but from what I've seen, it tends to stream a little bit younger. But he was talking about Twitch, and we were talking a little bit about the stuff I do, and he was like, oh, you should do Twitch. And I'm like, what? I don't even know what that is. And he kept talking about it and talking about it. Hey, how are you? It's nice to see everybody today. He kept talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. And I was like, and it was almost to the point where it seemed strange, you know, like, oh, are you still talking about the same thing? And you kind of come back in and you're like, are you still talking about the same thing? And I'm like, oh, he is. He's still talking about Twitch. And then you kind of feel like, oh, this is important. This is important for a totally different reason than why I think it's important. I'm supposed to do that. Okay. I never saw the guy again. Talked to him for like an hour and a half and never saw the man again. Because that was the only purpose for him. Just to plant that seed, say, oh, you should go do that. Okay, that's a good idea. And never saw him again. I'll probably never see him again because there's no purpose in ever seeing him again. So, do I have a favorite video game? No, I don't play video games. I did when I was younger. I am on a streaming website. I know that. But it also has other content too, my friend, not just streaming. I've seen some of the other content on here, and it's not just about streaming video games. No, I was from the original video games, like Pac-Man and the old ones. E-girls. Well, there are people with a lot of interesting content. You might want to explore some of the other channels. I have not explored that many, but I think some of it's pretty interesting. Some people just get on and sing. I did see one where someone just did that. I thought that was kind of beautiful. A lot of people will just stream to get over their fear of stream. I actually never like to do anything live. So I think part of this for me is just to do some live stuff. I mean, I've done some interviews, but they were always taped. I've never done like live anything. So some of it for me, I think, was that. And to connect with people in a different way, since I couldn't really go out and do it my normal way with all the COVID restrictions. So I don't really know what e-girls are. Are they just women on Twitch? Is that what you guys call them? E-girls. What about e-boys? In Korea, girls outperform boys in all subjects. I did not know that. Must be a, now is that really true? I don't know if I really believe that. That could be just okay. Well, I see. Okay, well, I think everyone's on there for their own reasons. And I wouldn't judge why any of them are on there. They perform some kind of service that someone's enjoying, so you gotta kind of respect that, what they're doing and why they're doing it. But that's not all the content on here. I'm sure there is different content on here. I did look at a couple of the women on here and a couple of the men too. I did look at a couple of the streaming. Well, not that kind of service. And most of it looked pretty, normal. Just kind of normal stuff. But everyone's got their thing. Everyone's got their thing. But you also got to look at what you're trying to do and what kind of clientele, people you want to engage with. I want to keep my stream in a certain space where we can talk about subjects that are more in line with consciousness. That's what I talk about. If I go to a bar and talk to people, that's what I talk about. And you would be surprised. Yeah, you will be surprised how many people just in a bar will want to talk about their dreams and all this other stuff. I mean, it's really funny. I mean, it's funny in a sense you wouldn't think so, but I've talked to so many people about that type of stuff. We talk about what they're afraid of, how to conquer their fear. I mean, and sometimes we just watch a basketball game, and sometimes we do that too. But we talk about a variety of stuff. And you can do the same thing on any platform. You decide what aspect you want to be when you show up. Just like, yeah, I did think there were some good musicians and some good content on here too. I normally do sessions over Zoom during COVID, not because of COVID though. I don't really play in that reality of COVID. I know it was a reason for it in that consciousness level to move the collective, but I don't. It's real for it's real for the people in it. So when I would say, okay, COVID's not real, it's not real to me. It's real for the people in that level of consciousness, in that reality. It's real for them. Different level of consciousness, you're going to look at it a different way. To me, it was a collective clearing to clear out a lot of fear in that collective. But I only wear a face mask if it's required. I have a sheer one, it's fake. I do that just to kind of play the game because there's a lot of fear and you want to be respectful to people that are afraid. But I don't do virtual now because of COVID. I do it just because it's easier for me. Because of people, and I will have people here if I know them and I've met them, so I will, but I also have a cat, and cats are very, their energy is a lot different and they can cause a lot of clearing, which in one level of consciousness, people will call it allergies, but cats clear a lot of stuff for people, so that's one reason why I kind of stopped it. Because if cats kind of try to open people up, and if you're not open right away, you sneeze a lot. You have a lot of, so that's one reason why I started. How Taylor, let me read that real quick. Well, I talk to them individually, honestly. I mean, you talk to them about what they want to talk about. And you hone in on what's going on with them. I mean, the more conscious you get, the more you can see across everything. You can see through it. So you can see why they're really there and what they want to talk about. A lot of people come to me because they want to know how something's going to turn out. Not like as a psychic, but they want to look at different things. Like what is going on in my life for real? That's a lot of what people think it's, I think it's this, or is it this? How do I decode what am I trying to tell myself? And sometimes you can just give people insights on what might be coming up for them and what they're trying to tell themselves or what they don't want to see, what they're playing in and they don't even see why they're playing in it. If they get stuck, how do we get unstuck? I don't know if I'd say it's therapy. I mean, I would say it's just I act as a higher aspect of themselves, a different consciousness for them. And we try to put things in that perspective. I wouldn't call it therapy. I mean, I have a master's degree, but I don't have a PhD. So you got to be kind of careful on what you call it. New wave thinker, even though it's kind of old wave. A lot of people will call it New Earth ambassadors. That's kind of a word I've seen because everyone's on a journey. We're going to talk about everybody's journey. We just kind of talk about stuff they don't feel comfortable talking about. You really just want to create, and this is for everybody, everyone who, ever listens to anything. You want to create a very safe space for people to say what they want to say and not judge what people are saying. The human wants to judge everything. I mean, if they want to judge everything and there's a victim and, oh, that person, they didn't do anything wrong and that person did it all wrong. There's agreements to everything everybody does. Even the most shittiest thing you think you ever did, you had an agreement to do it. So technically, was it wrong that you did it? You're supposed to do it. You said you were going to do it, and you did it. Now you get to a point when your consciousness where you can choose what you participate in and what you don't, but there are certain times when we do things because we're supposed to. That's how it's supposed to work. Do I read tarot cards? Well, I have tarot cards, and I will kind of show people how to look a little deeper into them. Not so much go in the meaning of the cards, but kind of what pops off at them, what pops off the card at them. It's not so much about the card, because it's really just you picking the cards. It's a higher aspect of you trying to talk to you because you're not listening. That's why we go to any of those outside sources like tarot cards or even psychics or whatever you want to go to. But when you're reading tarot cards, or if you go to a professional tarot card reader, or if you go to a professional psychic, because a lot of people will kind of feel disconnected and want to connect with someone else. Remember, they're only going to tell you the strongest energy at that moment. You shift your frequency, you shift everything. That's why most of the time when you go to a lot of those types of things, they're not 100% right. And people always say, well, oh, they're not 100% right. Why aren't they 100% right? Well, you shift the whole timeline. It's like everyone saying, if you're psychic, why don't you know the lottery numbers? Well, I'm not supposed to know the lottery numbers. If I was supposed to know the lottery numbers, I'd know the lottery numbers. It doesn't really work like that. You expand your consciousness, you see a lot of stuff. The soul really doesn't give a shit about lottery numbers, but you can see a lot of other things that are maybe more important than lottery numbers. But I will tell you this, if you're supposed to win the lottery and that's in your plan, that's in your blueprint, you'll win the lottery. You'll just know the numbers. It doesn't have to be a forced thing. Everything that's soul aligned is very easy to do. If you're having any conflict in it, any walls in the way where you can't seem to get stuff done, that's because you're not supposed to go that way. Maybe not forever, but maybe just for right now. It's blocked for a reason. It's not just blocked because you got to try to ram through it. That's really not why it's blocked. Okay, I don't think tarot is entirely bullshit. I do not either. I think tarot it's just a tool you're using to talk to yourself. Well, you don't like the answer you get. Well, let's talk about tarot for a minute then. Why do people do tarot? Because they want an answer that's disconnected from their mind. A lot of times people already know the answer, they just don't like the answer they got. A lot of people will come to me and go, oh, I just can't get the answer. No, you got it. You just don't like it. Your human doesn't like the answer. Your soul's fine with the answer. Your human doesn't like it. That's why you're going to sit here and tell me, oh, I didn't get the answer. Oh, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't get it. No, you did. You just don't like it. Because our human didn't like that answer. Our human wants another one. So I'm going to ask the question 100 different times or go to 1,800 readers to see if I can get the one I want. But when you just detach it, or people use pendulums. I don't know if anyone's ever done a pendulum. I don't have a necklace on, or I'd show you a pendulum. You can take any kind of, it's just better for yes, no questions, but it does kind of connect you in a little bit. So they're kind of fun things to use kind of in the beginning to really start to feel the connection. You can take any chain, ask a question, and then calibrate what your yes is. If your yes is, it's going to go, back and forth. If your no is, it's going to shake side to side. If it doesn't know, it's going to go, if you don't know yet, it's going to go in a loop. It's going to go in a circle, and just look at what happens. Now, scientifically, they'll say that your subconscious is going to twitch your hand a little teeny bit to make it move one way or the other. But it kind of focuses your energy a little bit on how powerful your energy can be. And you'll find it'll really start swinging a lot more the more focused you are. So pendulums are kind of a fun way to kind of hone in. Some people have crystals at the bottom of it. I found you really don't need anything. You ask a question, you see what it does. Now, I don't so much use it so much for the yes or no answer, but I would just look at it because those answers shift. That's why people are so hard on psychics or so hard on this, so hard on that, especially if you shift a lot. I remember going to psychics years ago and listening, because sometimes when you're really emotional about something, you need someone else to tell you that doesn't have any emotion around it. The emotion clouds the third eye. You can't see anything because because you're too emotional about it. You don't see anything. That's why people go to someone else. That's why they pull a tarot card. They want to take your head out of it. Because when you're emotional about anything, you can't make a choice. You cannot come from your highest aspect. You don't have the capability because you're disconnected, because you got too many emotions that have to clear about it first. I mean, think about it. If you're pulling a tarot card about something you don't give a shit about, you don't care, whatever. You get all emotional about something, you go to pull a tarot card, your hand will be shaking because you want to see what the answer is going to be. But, so that's why people will go. But maybe 20% of the time it would kind of play out, but the energies sort of play out. It usually wouldn't be in the context, they would say, but the energies would kind of play out, you know, whether it played out as friendships or it played out as something that played out with your parents or that plays out with your children. The energies are kind of going to play out in some ways. Sometimes they never did, because they're reading one timeline. They're reading the timeline they have access to, the frequency they're at. Just like when people say, I'm going to read the Akashic Records. You're going to read the Akashic Records, what? The human Akash, the galactic Akash, Lemurian Akash? What Akash you want to read? There's a million of those too. You're going to read the one, they're going to read the one they have access to. It's not the one and only one there is. It's the one they have access to. Now, if you're drawn to that, there might be a message in that for you. Something you need to kind of push you to in a different direction or push you forward in something. So don't negate what you're attracted to. If you're attracted to it, there's a reason. You need to see what it is. Maybe it's just for you to see, oh, I could give him my power weight of that stuff, and that doesn't matter, that person knows more than I do. That person doesn't know more than me. I have a lot of people who will think, you know, I know more than they do. And they'll ask me a question. I'll go, oh, I think it's probably, you know, this. And they'll go, oh, did you use your psychic abilities? I'm like, no, I just read the sign in that person's yard and I came to that conclusion. You know, people always want to give someone else more power. That's also the game the human aspect will play. It wants to give someone else all the power, so then you have all the power, then I can't be responsible for what happens in my life. That person is. You know, if you go to a psychic or a tarot card reader and they're wrong, well, that was on them. They were wrong. They read something. They're reading some type of energy. But sometimes, you know, sometimes I'll pull a card out if it feels appropriate. We'll look at it. Because sometimes I'll say something, they'll say, yeah, I feel that. And then they'll pull a card and the card will kind of correspond with that. And they kind of like that. But you don't need any of that. That's why a lot of people, you don't need to be in front of a tarot card reader. Just energy. You don't need to be in front of anybody. Makes people feel better sometimes when, you know, you're sitting in front of them. But you don't have to be. I have a very full room today. How lovely. Any other questions? Because I'm kind of out of topics for today, I think, unless someone has something else they want to talk about or ask about. We could talk a little bit more about different tools people use. Tarot cards are one of them to kind of connect. Just remember, it's just an aspect of you connecting. Some people do a Ouija board. It's just a higher aspect of you talking to you. You kind of got to get over all that energy stuff. Energy, that's not what I wanted to say. Entity stuff. It's another entity. You know, that's kind of a played word now too. It's just you. It's all just you. People channeling. It's all just you. You can't channel something that's not you. It's you at a different frequency. It's a future version of you. Because as you go on your life's course, you're going to change frequencies all the time. It's a different version of you. It's a higher frequency of you because it's somewhere else. And it's not embodied in you yet. So it's outside somewhere. That's why people channel it. They feel like, oh, it comes from outside. It comes from outside because you haven't achieved the frequency inside yet. That's why it feels like it's out there. And oh, that's not mine. That's you. It's just not you recognize yet. It's something else. That's why it seems foreign to you, because you don't hold the frequency. A lot of channel material you'll see, people will name. We talked a couple of weeks ago, I think, about the Seth books that Jane Roberts wrote on an entity that she channeled, an oversoul that she channeled, but it was just her. It's just a different aspect of her, but she saw it as something else because she didn't have the frequency of the oversoul, which that's a very high frequency to get to. So, you know, and back before 2012, we really didn't have the capability to embody all of that. So when you look at that kind of stuff, just keep that in mind. A lot of people are kind of iffy on channeling. They don't want to channel, but it just opens you up to something else. Don't get too bogged down on, what it is. It's you. It's all you. Everything outside of you, you created it. It's your own video game. Someone asked, when you asked me my favorite video game, the one I created, the one I live in every day. It's just as fun as any video game you'll ever purchase, because you start to see the patterns in it and all the themes in it and how you keep doing the same shit over and over again and keep having the same result. But everyone keeps doing it. Until you look at it in a different way and see maybe why you're doing it. Wasn't that was one of the not beginning scenes, but in that, what was the movie? Ready Player One, when they did the race in the very beginning, and they all kept doing it the same way, and they all kept having the big King Kong, prevent everyone from getting past that little threshold, but they all kept doing it the exact same way over and over and over again. So someone went back and looked at it differently, and then he went a different way. It's the same thing. Look at all the things you do the same damn way, but you think you're going to get a different outcome. Even if you're not doing it the same with the same person or the exact same situation, the energy is the same. That's what you want to look at, the energy of why you're doing it. Why are you there? What do you want from it? Why are you participating in it? If it doesn't make you happy, why is it in your life? Those are big questions. People talk about shifting and changing your frequency. I mean, what do you want out of something? Why are you participating in it? There's a reason you're there. What's the reason? If it doesn't make you happy, why is it there? And you're going to have 100 stories about why it's there. And the minute you get into a story about why it's there, you're in your human aspect. You're in the smallest little version of you. That's how you know it's your human aspect, because you have a big story around it that you will try to tell everyone about it as to why you're in the middle of it. That's what we all do. I know as soon as I start a story about it, I am shifting completely into my human aspect. If I have a big old 10-minute story that I need to tell myself, or for some other reason see compelled to tell somebody else, it's completely human aspect of me. Because the soul has no story to it. There's no story. What's the story? I had a contract, I had an agreement, I participated in it, I did it, they had an agreement, they did it, and that's the story. What's the next story? What's the next thing you're going to do? What's next? It's always kind of what's going to be the next thing. The old stuff. Everyone wants to know, how do I, what's my future going to be? Well, what are you thinking about right now? That's your future. In this moment, you're creating the next thing. What are you creating? What are you thinking about? That's what you're going to create next. What you created now, today, that's old news. That's what you thought about before. It doesn't even matter. So when I say, as soon as you leave a situation, the whole reality crumbles. It doesn't exist anymore. It only exists because you keep it going. And people really in their human aspect can have an issue with that. When they're in that level of consciousness and you're in a different space, you'll kind of it'll be a door open for a little while, and then you're like, I'm going to shut down the reality because it's not a balanced reality anymore. Let me shut that reality down. But they still think it's reality there. No, that's gone. I shut that down, because we don't participate in that much. So I try to bring it back full circle, which is probably very hard after my rambling for the last so long, my nonlinear ramblings. But, loneliness has different meanings, just like COVID does, in different levels of consciousness. Don't get so bogged down on, what it means. But it's totally different, just like everything. Like when you look at, even when we table loneliness for a minute and just go back to, like, if you see a mass shooting on TV, it's tragic. Everyone gets very sad. Everyone gets this. Had a lot of emotions come up. That's the reason the reality took place. The tragic things are what the human needs to clear. It doesn't have to be, but that's what the human goes to clear. Those sad things. It brings up the sadness. Doesn't create the sadness. It triggers the sadness to be released from the body. Everyone raises in vibration. It shifts the collective, right? That's the reason it happens. The shooter had an agreement to be the shooter. The victims had an agreement to be the victims. And that's that simple. Now that seems cold when you say it like that. because there are a lot of people in a different level of consciousness that get really bogged down on, oh, that person's bad, that person's good, that person deserves this, that person deserves that. Well, that's the blame game the human plays. There's a reason it happened. It's hard to judge anyone when you realize you've played out every role in every reality. You've been the rapist, you've been raped, you've been the murderer, you've been murdered, you've been the slave, you've been the slave owner. Pick one. You've been all of it. In this reality, you don't play that role. Someone else is playing that role. They're providing a service to humanity, to shift humanity in some way. That's what they're doing. And to someone in a different level of consciousness, that feels cold. So I don't say that. I will say that if someone asks me that. But you also have to be respectful. For someone in that reality, it's very real to them. And it's triggering a lot of stuff for them because they're in that. So we have to be compassionate to that. Because for them, it is real. But you can watch a lot of stuff on TV. It's like watching a video game. It doesn't even seem real anymore. You get into such a different frequency, and that just seems like you're literally watching stuff that's not real anymore. But you do have to remember it's kind of real to them. For them, it's real. But all that stuff triggers you forward. It pushes everybody forward. That's its purpose. So when you start to play around and look at things from different perspectives, look at higher purposes in a sense. But it's really somewhat not a higher purpose as it's just, it's a different level of consciousness, a different perspective. And then you can look at it all and see where you come out at the end and how you feel about it. But I think when you start shifting how you look at everything, you feel differently about it. And look at the stuff that really triggers you. Some stuff won't trigger you at all. And some stuff will really trigger you. If you're still part of those collectives that are going through certain things, you'll be triggered because it's part of that collective. You're still attached to that collective in some way. So if I don't have any more questions, I think I'm going to sign off. Do I have anything else anyone wants to talk about that is related to consciousness in some way? Or just a general question, it's fine. As long as they're respectful questions, that is my... No? Going once? Going twice? 3 times? 4 times? Okay. Well, I do appreciate everyone joining me today. It was a lot of fun. I always feel better it's always funner when you have a full room because it kind of drives the content forward a little bit and we get to talk to what people want to talk about. So thank you very much. I will see you next time.